Good afternoon. I am delighted to welcome you today to Making a Cookbook for Performing Our Future, which is part of Imagining America's month-long collective creative engagement. My name is Mina Matlin, and I serve as Imagining America's Managing Director and the lead organizer for this virtual series. So each week this month, we have been engaging in a collective reimagining of the multiple systems, structures, and ways of being that shape our lives. This week, we focus on the spaces, places, and ways in which we build community with a weekly call to action that invites us to identify the skills we are responsible for building in our communities to create the liberatory spaces of our dreams. Today's presenters directly address this call, offering recipes for building community wealth and power drawn from their multi-regional collaboration. And before we get started, I have a few logistical items to cover regarding today's session. This session offers English closed captioning. To access the closed captioning, click on the CC button found at the bottom of your Zoom window. Throughout today's conversation, we also invite you to use the chat to introduce yourself and to share your reflections. We will have a dedicated time later in the conversation for your questions, so please place any questions you have for our panelists in the chat as well. And finally, we invite you to engage with us on social media. Our event hashtag is Reimagining America 20. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our presenters, each of whom are members of the group Performing Our Future. Co-founded in 2015 by Appalshop, Imagining America, and Lafayette College's Economic Empowerment and Global Learning Project, Performing Our Future has evolved into a multiracial coalition of rural and urban communities working through culture to build power and wealth. We are joined today by POF lead organizer and Appalshop staffer Tiffany Turner, Denise Griffin Johnson, who is director of the Arch Social Community Network in West Baltimore, Milwaukee-based artist organizer Adam Carr, John Harris, who in addition to working with the Arch Social Community Network is president of Baltimore's Moravia Walter Community Organization, and Gwen Johnson, leader of the Letcher County Culture Hub and longtime secretary treasurer of the Hemp Hill Community Center. Thank you all for being here, and I am now turning the space over to you.
Denise, you're muted.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I want to hear good afternoon back. But anyway, I know this is a virtual meeting. Welcome. Welcome to our presentation, Performing Our Future. Performing Our Future is a national coalition. We operate under the framework that we tell our own story. We build our own power, and we create and co-create together. And doing that, we call ourselves and our places community centers of power, because we're telling our own stories and we're making our own way. And during this moment that we're in now with the immigration issues and children being locked away, with the COVID virus, with the national protests, we came together even closer to decide that who we are and what we have been doing is so central to our communities, and that it even requires us to step more into our power, thinking that if our communities were valued more, the rollout of what has been going on, especially with COVID-19, would have took place differently, because the communities in their center of power would have been able to lend a different kind of hand to the mobilization that has been needed to keep our families and people in our communities safe. So again, thank you. And I'm gonna hand this over to Gwen so she can share more about Performing Our Future.
Well, hello. Performing Our Future has been really an exciting thing to be a part of. Here in Letcher County, Kentucky, we have 20 organizations who are a part of the Letcher County Culture Hub, and we became a part of Performing Our Future in its inception, and have really counted it as a very valuable thing in meeting our goals as an organization. We have a lot of different work going on in the county. We have some volunteer fire departments who are involved, some businesses that are involved, community centers, and mostly the community centers of power are one of the greatest pieces of the Performing Our Future coalition. And so we have been doing a lot of work here in Letcher County during the pandemic. We came together, we've distributed food, and we've built a pavilion for outside activities where people can social distance, with mask wearing and all that. And we've done several projects during this time. We have taken part in peaceful protests that have happened in our county and surrounding counties. And so we are trying to do our part and to be a part of the movement that is going on across the nation for equality. So without further ado, I'll just hand it over to another colleague to talk about what's going on with them. Black Belt Citizens.
Thanks, Gwen. Hi, everybody. I'm Tiffany Turner. I am the lead organizer for Performing Our Future and also a member of BBC, Black Belt Citizens Fighting for Justice and Health. BBC, as we call them, has been very busy. We are a membership organization. We span from the tip of Mississippi all across Alabama. We have a variety of members doing various things. Some of the activity that we've taken a part in during the pandemic is food distribution, also mass distribution at a variety of locations. We have several locations also been involved in free testing. And we are just glad to be here and proud to be a part of Performing Our Future, where we're working together to own what we make. And I am going to hand it off to my next colleague.
Thanks, Tiffany. My name is Adam Carr. I'm currently sitting on the south side of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm here as a representative of the Rural Urban Flow Network, which exists across Milwaukee, an urban county, an urban city, and Sauk County, a rural county, about 2 hours away or so, just north and west of Madison. So the Wisconsin Rural Urban Flow Network, you can see in this image right now, that's an image of us at an event called Fermentation Fest, at a part of that event called the Detour, the Farm Art Detour that our collaborators, the Worm Farm Institute, put together in Sauk County. That really is this remarkable invitation into the culture and the agriculture of Sauk County that we've been doing for a number of years. And I thought this is a little crass, but that was kind of like the Tinder date kind of thing. And as we started seeing each other and we were attracted to each other, what we had going on in each other's places, we decided to really make it official and formalize as the Rural Urban Flow Network, which has allowed really our kind of symbol is the infinity loop, is that we have this rural side, this urban side, and that network is to get those to flow together and to see all the different emergent sparks that can come from just people who are oftentimes understood as being in division, as building a continuum together. So I can tell you, I can go on and on about Rural Urban Flow. In fact, right behind me, that is a garment and artwork that was sewn in the city of Milwaukee and painted out in Sauk County by two of our artistic friends who are part of our group. And with that, I could go on and on, but I would love to pass it on to my dear friends in Baltimore, John and Denise.
Good afternoon.
Denise, you're muted again.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm John Harris, and I am the Secretary for the Arts Social Community Network. Our mission is to revitalize, some of our mission perspectives is to revitalize the old West Baltimore area, specifically Penn North, through arts, culture, community action. We have 4 component areas that we focus on primarily. It's cultural engagement, economic cultivation, youth development, and community outreach. Our intent is to uplift the community and ensure that we have agency, presence, and celebration of our history and legacy with a particular focus on the Arts Social Club and the work that's been done for the past 115 years. Founded in 1905, we stand on their shoulders very prominently and utilize that leverage to reach out into the community and do good works. And I will let Denise add on from there.
No, John, you covered it all. The Art Social Club has been around for 106 years with an original mission to preserve the culture of the African American community. Primarily, the Art Social Club has done it through dance and music. And the other part is to have stimulating intellectual conversations. Like John said, the Art Social Community Network, which is that the Art Social Club helped to get started after the 2015 uprising. And the club itself played a huge part in keeping things pretty settled at Penn and North. You see the picture of the men in their t-shirt, the 300 men who were instrumental again in trying to keep things as less violent as possible. And the Art Social Club is a men's group, and over the years, they have asked women if they should stay a men's group, and women agree that they should stay a men's group. And the men of the Art Social Club acknowledges in public that they would not exist for as long as they have existed without the support of women. And I think that is also important to highlight. So the Art Social Club is our community center of power as we are one of the delegations of Performing Our Future. Adam?
So so I'm going to just share a little bit of the story of how we've come together and of Performing Our Future and how that leads. If you're into this session, you know that we're going to talk about a cookbook, and we want you to know who we are, because the cookbook really is, and the recipes that come from each of our places, the intention of that is to be a document of who we are in a deeper way than just saying, here's our names and our descriptions and missions and all that. So to do a little storytelling here, we started in July of 2018 in Uniontown, Alabama. And we went to the Black Belt Citizens, a big group of us. And I wanted to start with this photo because what they shared with us was part of the prehistory of the Black Belt Citizens was a mountain of coal ash coming to their community, being dumped in their backyard, and them being treated as if they could not build enough power to have a say about what happened in their place. Getting to see that firsthand, getting to be part of that, was really moving for all of us as part of Performing Our Future, because we could identify in our own places the kind of extractive ideas that have come through deindustrialization, through whatever kind of extractive relationship somewhere else had to our own place that was limiting and reducing and dehumanizing the people who live in each of our places. So we found in that time in Quinn Chapel in Uniontown, Alabama, what I you can see actually the back of the heads of some of the people who are here today. We really started forming a bond. And I think I was just talking about how these images almost feel like contraband. Like, remember when we used to be able to get together? Part of what we did during that adventure we started together is we had a chance to start sharing each other's home cooking. We had a session in the Uniontown library. We all just started doing our own thing with the young people there. And that was a time where sparks were flying, where magic was happening. We continued that later that year in 2018 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We got to host, and we really took, it was so generous and gracious and beautiful, our time in Uniontown. We kind of used that as a template of how we wanted to show off our own place and knit in what we do in Milwaukee and in Sauk County with all of our wonderful partners from around the country. So we had a chance to kind of show off Milwaukee. Again, it's this kind of home cooking. It's like, here's what we know how to do. Here's who we are. Here's the flavors. Here's the culture. Here are the tastes that make us who we are. And oftentimes are tools of building power. So we had a great meeting in Milwaukee. And I'm just looking at John right now, because I was kind of the John in Milwaukee running around thinking about everyone's comfort and what's going on. We actually then went to Baltimore this March. And this was literally the week before the world shut down. We were together, and we just got in by the skin of our teeth. We had this meeting in the Arch Social Club. So this is the interior, as Denise mentioned before, of this incredible, deeply rooted place. You can see here, they showed us such a wonderful time. And we also had the opportunity, we're a family at Performing Our Future, and we had some difficult conversations with each other. We did that hard work that families need to do. We had the opportunity really to, I hope, add a small little footnote to the long history of the Arch Social Club. And then we went on our way with plenty of work to do, plenty of conversations to have, a lot of complexity to sort out. And as I mentioned, this is Adam Johnson and Yawa saying goodbye. We all went back to our places, then the world shut down, and we found ourselves, we came to each other. Performing Our Future had a meeting in the week subsequent to the global pandemic shutting down each of our places. And despite the long list of things we had to do, somehow we made the decision to make a cookbook together. That was sort of I hope that wasn't too much background, but that was kind of the situation we found ourselves in, having just had, we've had these series of meetings and plenty of other work that we've done together in between. We came out of this kind of powder keg moment in Baltimore, and then we got home, and then we said, you know what, we need to make a cookbook together. What you're seeing, one of our dear delegation members from Alabama, Mama Yawa, is not able to be with us this evening, or this whatever time of day it is, but this is one of the recipes she's collected in Alabama, and I wanted to just give Yawa some props, also just to show a little bit of where the cookbook is heading. And with that, we have a brand new lead organizer, and we're all deeply excited to have her as part of the family, Tiffany Turner. And I think what we wanted to do really with the balance of our time is to have an open conversation. So if you have any questions for us, feel free to throw them in the Q&A. But in Tiffany's actual job interview, we said to her, we have this cookbook idea. Can you organize us in this job interview and help us figure out how we're going to make this happen? And she did. That's part of why we hired her. And what we wanted to offer you all is really kind of an organic conversation between us about letting Tiffany be kind of the moderator, asking us questions around this cookbook. So Tiffany, I hand it to you and now I will step back into a position as a panelist and let you lead and ask questions.
Adam, thank you for that. I think you did a beautiful job of bringing everybody up to speed with everything that we've got going on, Performing Our Future. And so let's just dig into, where did the idea of having a cookbook come from? Adam, you mentioned that, you had this organic meeting right before the shutdown of the pandemic. I just want you guys to tell us, where did it come from?
So yeah, I'll try to respond to that. Yeah, right after the Baltimore annual meeting, we got to call and talked about the work that we do in our different places and how important that work is with COVID spreading. And then we talked about what we could do and are planning to do in our places of belonging. And then the conversation further talked about the power that we acknowledge together that we have in our community, and how if that power was acknowledged differently by systems, we could be even more useful.
Hey, Denise, you got muted there for a second.
Denise, somehow you're muted.
During our time together over the years, we have developed a lot of new knowledge, terms that we use in our different delegations, terms that we have adopted across delegations. That's our new knowledge that is a part of the cookbook that we want to be able to share with other folks, and that doing this on the ground community center of power work, you come up with your own expressions based on the environment that you belong in and what you hear from other people that helps to develop your cultural actions or help you to root. So that is how one idea of the cookbook came about, and that in that cookbook, you will see language that we have developed individually in our delegations, and languages that we are going to use across delegations that make up Performing Our Future.
Anybody else care to add?
This is John Harris. One thing I want to add is that during our annual meeting, one of our members, Annie Jane Cotton out of Letcher County Culture Hub, brought up a passionate plea to create with us. And we all agreed with enthusiasm that we wanted to create together as well. And so with that, this cookbook was an idea. This is a way to create together. This actually produces something, gives us something that we collaborate and create together. And so this is how we ended up landing on, one of the ways we ended up landing on this was an opportunity to pull in artwork, pull in cultural reflections, pull in community similarities, and pull everything into one space and create this book together.
Gwen, I'm remembering one of the early conversations, and I remember I always vibe with you, Gwen, but I remember vibing with you on this idea specifically of, at the beginning of the pandemic, one of the conversations was, as our systems are shutting down, immediately people were trying to figure out scarcity, like the idea of, okay, people can't work anymore, or maybe the normal offerings in a grocery store that might be available, or of restaurants, or however you get food, are shutting down. And one of the conversations we had in that initial cookbook inception was, a lot of the folks in the communities where we work have learned through their culture to do a lot with a little. Like one of the things I say about Milwaukee all the time is, we've never been richer, more powerful, never had all the resources of other places. We're at our best when we're cheap, when we're resourceful, when we're scrappy. And in fact, the generations of doing that has made a culture. And so we were talking about how a cookbook, so some of the folks living in our community, some of our partners, some of who we are folks who have looked scarcity in the eye, who know scarcity and aren't scared of scarcity, or have figured out ways to find abundance even in the face of that. And Gwen, I remember you talking about just like how much people know how to do in Letcher County, Kentucky, and how, how the pandemics, it's like, yeah, come on, we can take it on. So what were you, I remember, Gwen, what were some of your thoughts that we had in that moment?
Well, we've always just been used to doing a lot with a little. And so to be able to stretch things as far as possible. And one of the things that has been remarkable with this Performing Our Future thing for me has been finding out that across the country, in inner city Baltimore or Wisconsin or wherever, and then for sure down in Alabama, a lot of, we have a lot of differences, but we have like plenty of similarities. And so I always talk about what I call poor people's food, and it's the food that everybody has. I mean, the rich folks like it, and the poor people like it. It's the food that's familiar to all of us. And so, things like cornbread. And one of the things I was thinking about was y'all had gathered recipes down in Alabama, and one of them was for cornbread. And we went up to inner city Baltimore, up to the Arch Social Club, which was such a wonderful trip and a wonderful thing to be a part of. And we talked about the similarities and the differences. And one of the things that was remarkable about that trip, and part of what developed this cookbook idea, was we were talking about food and breaking bread and how important that is. And when we all get together, we do a lot of that. But then we got up there in Baltimore, and I found out that Denise had this. I stayed at Denise's house, and in her dining room, she has this thing on her wall about the steps. And I'm like, "Hey, Denise, what is this about the steps?" And she said that the women in the community took great pleasure and great pride in taking care of the steps. They have these wonderful marble steps to these townhouses, and we saw a lot of them, and I was really impressed by them. But she said the women would, on Saturday, they would scrub those steps. And on Saturdays, the women here in the coal camp where I live in Eastern Kentucky, they scrub their porches and steps. And it was like how you enter the community and how the community enters your space is through those porches and steps. And so this cookbook is just kind of a continuation of that. And for me, you can't separate the porches and steps in the cookbook. I mean, to me, they go hand in hand because it's something that we all like. It's something that we all share. The recipes might be just a little bit different, but poor people's food is poor people's food. And I'm not saying that this cookbook is going to only have poor people's food in it, but there'll be a lot in it, I'm sure, because there's a couple of recipes that Rachel Sexton from Letcher County had sent in, and one of them was for funeral sandwiches, and the other is a recipe to make a quilt. And so and there again, it's just, we've all got coverlets that mean a lot to us, heirlooms that came from generations past, that sort of thing. And this cookbook is just a continuation of all those similarities, as well as some of the poignant differences in recipes.
Thanks so much for that, Gwen. And I did get a chance to see those glorious steps when I visited Baltimore. I want to talk about now. We talked about the language. Denise was talking about how we're going to be sharing language, and then you was talking about the similarities of the same foods in different regions. I want to ask why or what is going to be different about our cookbook? What's going to set our cookbook apart from other cookbooks? What's going to be different about ours? What are we going to have to offer to the consumer?
So another piece of the cookbook that I think is beautiful is that we all have our place of belonging, rural and urban. And so we will be describing our places and the swag that we have in our places. Baltimore, definitely music. Talk about the Arch Social Club, we talk about West Baltimore. You have to talk about music, and you have to talk about fashion and the stories related to music and fashion. I recall in the Baltimore meeting, the club, our social club, celebrating 106 years in March, and it was this gentleman that had on this really nice looking, what's that color? Winter white type short dress coat. And I watched how Adam paid attention to him and made a comment about the way that he was dressed and the age of the people that basically attended the anniversary event. And so we talk about the Art Social Club and you talk about West Baltimore and people dressing up, going out, is really, really rooted in a very, very old tradition that Black folks have carried on when they leave their house, the expectation of the way that they're supposed to look and representing themselves and representing their families and representing their communities. So another piece of the cookbook is not only about food, but it's also about those recipes that were developed around music and around dress. And I think that's pretty interesting to read. And I'll share another story. We were interviewed by someone from Essence Magazine. Her husband, she and her husband came to the club, and they were dressed fine. They were dressed in business attire, minus the man's actual tie for his suit. And she asked me why people were so dressed up. She said that her and her husband felt as if they were not dressed appropriately. But again, it's back to the same thing that I said. And she asked me, she said, so what is this? And I said, well, this is culture. This is how we have been trained and how things carry on. So that's another piece of the cookbook that I think will be interesting, that talks more about place and story and those particular things that certain places have that carry from one generation to the next.
Hey, Denise, I'm just going to share real quick, a little audible. This is exactly the moment that Denise was just talking about for us. We're all bunched in a corner, and I dress like a scrub all the time. I'm always wearing a hoodie and a hat. And it's for the anniversary, and everyone's coming in, and they look good, and they have style, and they're just, and yeah, being in the Arch Social Club, and I'm sure everyone was like, who are those underdressed weirdos sitting over in the corner? Denise, that's probably my self-consciousness. My mom is Chinese, so I'm always like worried about myself. But it was to partake in that was one of probably the most enduring gift I'll take away from Arch Social Club, is being with the club on this anniversary. And really, I know this, I'm sure you guys are tired of it, but when she sang Baltimore, Nina Simone's Baltimore, I mean, that was just, I was in heaven, and I was in your heaven in Baltimore, one that I didn't even know it existed prior to this. And if I could just just real quick to answer your question, Tiffany, about what's different, I think one of the things that got us excited, in addition to the conversations about culture that Denise was talking about, is also we were talking about it being recipes for building power, for organizing. So for us, a lot of the recipes will have food as an outcome in a product, but we're also talking about, for example, in Wisconsin, rural urban flow, which is an idea that in this very moment, on October 22nd, 2020, we are feeling the rural urban divide real deep. No matter where you are in this country, you have to be aware that there's very big difference between cities and country. And we have been, much like a chef in their kitchen experimenting, we've been experimenting with the recipe for how we do rural urban flow for a while. So in each of our, strategically, tactically, how we create power within each of our places, we're imagining that as being recipes in this book. And I think even to that end, I mean, we're hopeful that this isn't just us as this delegation or these delegations of Performing Our Future saying, here are these great recipes, here's how everyone has to do it. I think in part, and there's great cookbooks that are out there. We're hoping that these can also act as inspirations for folks to maybe use some of our recipes, but also to say, what are our own recipes in our places? And for this to be a dialogue and it to be a call and response, a cookbook that isn't just sort of we want it to get dog-eared, and we want folks to be scribbling their own notes in it. And we want folks to be adding to it, so it isn't just a terminal product. So
I can't really see who's on there. This is John speaking out of the Baltimore delegation. So just to be clear, I'm more that blunt, direct, not maybe a little linear to some folks. So just to be clear, that we call it a cookbook, but it's going to be layered with stories of activism, organizing, community building. So we don't want to leave this presentation without being clear. We understand that cookbooks are cookbooks, but we're not just looking at a singular action to be this. It's supposed to be a tool for organizing, a tool for you to bring together folks. Maybe a particular recipe is something that someone will like in a particular framework of gathering. And that story that really we use to convey how we were successful in sharing this will help you. We take Tiffany Turner's experience with her previous career. We take Denise Johnson's experience with her current career. We take Adam Carr's experience. We put all that together with Gwen Johnson and John Harris, and you end up with Performing Our Future. That is a recipe for success that we've had so far. So we want to make sure that we're clear. The recipe is not just about food, it's about that organizing piece that we're hoping to get out of this tool that we built.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for your responses on that. And thank you, John, for that clarity to just identify that we're not just building recipes, but sharing culture and helping to strengthen organizing for people in different groups. Okay, so I want to segue a little bit into how our cookbook was formed by COVID-19. We talked a little bit about poor people's food, the cornbread, and the self-sustaining foods that we share across regions. But I would like to talk a little bit more in depth about how COVID has really just kind of molded our cookbook.
I want to start, but there's a siren going by in the background. So I apologize if you can hear it. It's almost past. So anyway, one thing that we at the Art Social Community Network and with the Art Social Club, we've had a partnership for the past 7-8 months. We've been doing food distribution, a lot of food, a lot of family support, a lot of work and heavy lifting, quite literally. And that has informed us on what people care about. It's informed us on what people need. It's informed us on how we can encourage them to not just come into a space, but to offer assistance. There's not a day that goes by that we do a food distribution that people don't offer support. They don't offer, well, this is what I'd like to do. This is what I'm interested in. So we know already that whatever our contributions are going to be relevant to the people that we represent. So being in COVID and seeing the stresses that people overcome and seeing how they really bind together and work toward a common goal for their community, their neighbors. Sometimes they know each other, sometimes they don't. But those are the things that we want to make sure we display or share in our contributions to the cookbook, is that sense of unity and spirit of cohesion in our communities that we represent.
Yeah, during this time in distributing food and other items from the club at Penn North, it's been pretty amazing to hear some of the comments that people have made, because we do play music at the corner of Penn and North, and remember a gentleman came over. He just wanted to compliment John for a song that we had played and how much that song meant to him and his wife, that he remembered the song, but at this particular time, the song just had a greater meaning to it. And so in terms of our conversation about the cookbook, this particular time, I believe gave us greater meaning to the work that we've been doing in our community, helping us to target or be a little more decisive, let's say, about how to be even stronger and supportive to what we care about.
What about you, Gwen? Gwen runs one of the best bakeries, I say, in Letcher County. Black sheep.
Well, I just, I'm listening to John and Denise talk, and I'm thinking about Baltimore and the Arch Social Club, and just, the outreach there that they do. And we've been trying to do something similar in a rural community, giving out food. And in the summer, we did quite a bit of that. And just the place of love and belonging that they have created in Baltimore, and the place of love and belonging that we have tried so hard to build here against the odds sometimes. Because, when you start reaching out to and trying to love what some people consider the unlovable, we don't consider them the unlovable, but there are those who do. And, you run into some brick walls with that, and people are not real happy sometimes to be in the same space that, some other people are. And we're just trying hard to create that. And, we went to Baltimore and went through the door, and there was Narcan beside the door. Well, we're real familiar with that here, because one of the things that Black Sheep Bakery does is we are second chance employment, and the only people that we employ are people coming out of incarceration. And a lot of them, have drug problems, and we have an epidemic of drug use around here. And when I went through the door at Arch Social Club and there was Narcan beside the door, I'm like, well, I'm home. Because outside that door was kind of almost the same kind of, it's not, unless you know what you're looking for, you won't know it's an open air drug market. Like our parking lot and playground is out here. You won't know that unless you know it. And when I went through the door and there was Narcan there, I was like, yeah, what I was seeing outside that I see outside at home all the time, that's another similarity in our communities. And trying in the midst of that to create and maintain a space against the odds where, where people can come and feel welcome and take a respite from what's going on outside the door and rest their bones a little bit, maybe drink something and kind of regroup before they go back out. I mean, that's invaluable in these community centers of power. To me, that's the real definition of a community center of power, a place where people can come and belong, a space that is maintained for that. And when I hear Denise talk about the 2015 uprising, and the things, the events surrounding that happened, incidences at the Arch Social Club, I know that truly is a place, a space maintained for the people, by the people, and that's the true definition of a community center of power is, a space that's maintained by the people, for the people, all the people. But when Adam was talking about being up there at that 100-year celebration, I mean, it was magnificent. And I just felt like, one of the hippies over in the corner, just trying to keep a low profile, because I, like Adam was saying, he was grunged out, I mean, in comparison to Denise moving through that space like a queen, and John, I mean, he was everywhere all at one time. He was in the kitchen, he was everywhere and impeccably dressed. And I'm like, wow, These are superheroes up here at
Yeah.
Arch Social Club. So
I
yeah,
had a 2-week-old mustard stain on my hoodie. I was like, if I had only known.
yeah.
One response to your question, Tiffany, and about COVID, locally here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, we're a network. And so we don't have like a central organization. We're kind of a coalition, even within a coalition. And as the systems were failing all around us, right? What I saw, and a lot of the folks in Sauk County, just by virtue of being connected to them on social media, I saw the folks within our network activate themselves, whether it was Venus Williams in Milwaukee, who's the head of a place named Alice's Garden, which became who's Venus is she calls herself a cultural doula. She is a pillar of the community here. So she's the leader of the Milwaukee side of our network. And then one of our core people, CK Ledesma, who helped co-found a group named Ayuda Mutua that was doing mutual aid work and just giving food to folks, particularly in the Spanish-speaking neighborhoods of Milwaukee. We had folks then in the Sauk County side who were activating themselves and creating and supporting. And I think what we saw in those moments of COVID is that of how much, and it's to where Denise began this conversation, how much wealth, how much power, how much, and how exists within our communities, and how much our communities in a moment of duress see that they can be what they need. And as you're pointing out, Denise, sometimes the resources for, like to get all that organized of food distribution, that might take a couple months, but there are people who look to their neighbors and say, we got to eat, right? So I think a cookbook idea, and in a small way too, a lot of the work that folks are doing is off the clock. It's volunteer work. It's just them being good neighbors. One of the other thoughts we had is just of how we can align some of our resources, which aren't huge by any means, but how even we can start paying some of the folks in our communities to write their stories and their recipes. And so I think that was another piece of, and yeah, so we have like just across our Wisconsin network, it was remarkable to see where people were just showing up during the pandemic. And if we had just said, I mean, if just theoretically, if you're a government agency and you wanted to make a grant report at the end of a term, you could have just looked across what folks were doing within our network, just write it all down and say, wow, those people produced millions of dollars of value in the community. And they're just doing it because that's where they belong. Those are their people. That's who we are. And I think to me that's why the cookbook didn't feel like a distraction. And it's why because, we have a lot of conversations and not everyone in our coalition immediately saw we should do a cookbook because we have other stuff we need to do. But, this idea came about in March and we're still with it. And we did decide as a group, it was something we wanted to pursue, even as the world's crumbling around us.
Thank you, Adam, for that. I'm just inspired to be a part of this group and these wonderful people who have
Earlier in the day,
done
Tiffany,
effortlessly.
Earlier in the day, I had to go downstairs after a meeting to apologize for yelling. So I'm sorry if I get too loud or worked up.
It's okay. That's your passion, Adam. That is your passion coming through. That's all that
I
is.
haven't heard that yet.
That's all that is. So yeah, I want to segue into another question that I have for the panel. And Denise, I believe you had mentioned the uprising and the Arch's involvement with those uprisings. I want to kind of segue into social justice and how can we incorporate that into our cookbook to have conversations about race as it may relate to organizing.
Well, I come from an organizing background and stumbled into cultural organizing, which I like a lot better than just traditional organizing. And in interacting with people in the realm of social justice, and folks telling me that that is what I was doing, social justice work. I never saw myself doing social justice work, and I still don't see myself as doing social justice work. I do the work of cultural organizing, which is the work of empowerment, and it adds the whole spectrum of the arts to empowering people. So for me, standing and representing my values and my family values and my community values, that's not social justice. That is what you're supposed to do as a human being. However, what I saw occurring across the nation was a beautiful thing in terms of the national protest. And why was it beautiful? Because it was another step up from just individual protests, such as the 2015 uprising. While you had protesters protesting going on in different states because of a particular thing that occurred. I mean, this stuff was happening all at once. And to see young people step up in a different way, and to for the media not to stay with the same narrative, and that narrative has always been, Black person get assassinated by the police and Black folks riot. So they couldn't stay with that narrative this time because a lot of people that were non-Black were caught helping to create the chaos. So that was beautiful to see that national protesting happening, but the narrative changed. And so therefore everybody had to start talking about it, which gives greater meaning to the value of people. So that's kind of how I look at that, Tiffany, through the lens of just being human and recognizing that that's who I am. That's what I care about. And that other thing that exists around race, that has nothing to do with me. So I'll just leave it right there.
Anybody else care to share? Care to share how we can incorporate conversations about race with our cookbook?
I mean, to me, we had a flow meeting this morning where a bunch of the folks across Sauk County and Milwaukee got on a Zoom together, and one of our great leaders in Sauk County, Melanie Talmadge Sains, who's part of the she's Ho-Chunk. She's part of the Ho-Chunk Nation, and she has a wonderful organization named Little Eagle Arts Foundation. She was talking about how in this moment, it undergirds some of the work of people of color in rural spaces to point out how much work they've done in the past and how this is a critical moment where their leadership can come forward and chart a new path for how the rural world can understand itself. And in that regard, I think one of the pieces that connects to race, but also deeply to culture is, like recipes. When I think about the network that we have, we're Wisconsin. If you're out there listening to this, I don't know what comes to mind when you think of Wisconsin, but when you see the recipes, which we'll talk about in a little bit, who we are as the Rural Urban Flow Network, and some of the deep-rooted cultural wealth across different racial groups in Wisconsin, it's a way to claim power. I think it is a way to say, not always to a lot of conversations locally when we talk about race, they're really cloaked in the fog of deficit and the fog of scarcity, the trance of scarcity. And I think, to me, a cookbook, and just to say that it's an opportunity for people to put their foot to self-define, to say they claim their own narrative, that they claim their own culture, particularly across like racial groups, which are almost inherently problematized a lot of times in our local conversation. So I don't know if that's how it works everywhere, but conversations about race in Milwaukee tend to be really regressive. And I think this cookbook, I think, is a way for people to stand in the power that they have and say, this is who I am and this is where I come from.
Food has always been like the center for me as an organizer. It seems like it's like the centerfold for like meetings and, when you're planning your action, you always seem to tend to do it around food, right? And so I feel like our cookbook is important, an important piece, an important tool that would assist in great recipes and also great organizing strategies as well. And so with that, anybody else have anything they want to add with our last talking about race and how we can incorporate conversations about race in our cookbook before I move on?
One quick note about that. So Adam is a fantastic host, just immense knowledge on his city. He has connections to so many people, and he's able to, every time we go there, show us communities that you wouldn't think are in Wisconsin. Milwaukee is a major city, and you have the Hmong people, you have, I maybe said that pronunciation wrong, but you have various different ethnicities and whatnot that all need to be brought in together because they have so much in common. He took us to multiple places, and most recently he took us out to this, I forget the ethnicity or the population group that it was from. But say again?
The Ho-Chunk tribe? Are you talking about when we went there?
Maybe.
The food truck park?
No,
Socolo?
the place where we ate and we got the food from across the street at the park.
Oh, we had some we went to sorry, I'm even lost a little bit. It's been a long couple of weeks. We had empanadas.
Oh yes.
Ooh, delicious.
Those connections that he shared with us are so rich throughout the city of Milwaukee. And it was just interesting to see the reach that he has out there into Milwaukee, and to know that, wow, I didn't know that this population of people was here. I didn't know that this connection was a through line for these groups. And what he's doing is trying to work in different organizations and different partnerships to make sure that they're aware that they have a similar issues to concern themselves with. So I think that that's great. And so it's not always just a black and white thing. It's so many other populations out there that can be brought together through sharing of recipes and things that as we collect these.
Thanks, John, for that. So let me just move right into the thick of it. So what are these pages gonna look like in the cookbook? What does it look like for each delegation, and how do we plan to incorporate our recipes as well as our organizing skills? Tell me what that looks like.
So, well, first of all, we do have a designer that's going to do their artistic magic in terms of the best design for what we're working towards. So that middle piece, and this is just my mind, and we talked about it in our committee. That middle piece is POF, the things that we've created together and learned together. And then the individual delegations having their pages, which reflect their place of belonging. So West Baltimore, I mentioned before, we have to talk about fashion. We have to talk about music. We're a water city, so we have to talk about seafood. We have to talk about our marble steps. Those kinds of things will be included in the Baltimore's delegation layout.
Anybody?
Oh, sorry,
ahead.
Tiff.
No, go ahead.
All right. Well, our hope in Letcher County is, we're about 98% white in Letcher County. And what we hope to do is pull in some recipes from our neighbors of color and kind of highlight some of their foods and draw similarities from our culture of European white background, ancestry, and our neighbors of color. And so that's our hope here. And I think that is very doable. So I think that'll be one way that we can highlight, those people and organize some of our neighbors who are not a part of the Letcher County Culture Hub. And so we're hoping that we can maybe make some of those recipes for Culture Hub gatherings, and maybe get some of those folks coming to Culture Hub meetings. That's our hope. So we'll see what happens with that, but I'm feeling pretty sure that with being able to pull some of our neighbors of color into things like story circles that we've had in the past, and we've had some great gatherings where we shared food, and so I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to do that. But I would like to see the pages of the Letcher County Culture Hubs section of that cookbook, include some line drawings and some art that is not from people with a European white lineage. So that's kind of my hope. So we're going to be working on that and trying to make that happen.
Gwen, you talked a little bit about funeral sandwiches in the beginning. Do you know much more about funeral sandwiches other than the compelling name of them?
Yeah, well, there's, we've always had transportation barriers. Our roads, until the coal companies came, were not real good. And so when somebody died in a community, I'll just tell you from my perspective, okay, from what's happened in my life, kind of, the funeral custom is to set up with the dead. And so if you're setting up with the dead, you're up all night. And so funerals become a social occasion. So I would, like, as a teenager, I would, tell whoever my boyfriend was, hey, my mom says I can set up at this funeral. Why don't you come to the funeral? Which is seen to be a real positive thing, that you go and set up with the dead. And so those funerals, and so they became real social occasions, because then there wasn't a lot of adult supervision because the adults would go on to bed. And so we'd hang out, and it'd turn into kind of like almost like a party. And these sandwiches are cheap to make. They're just some more poor people's food, because you make them from bologna and cheese if you got it. And I think Rachel's recipe that she submitted was pickles and mayonnaise. But if I'm making it, I'll put some eggs in it and some different things, and make sort of like an egg salad consistency that you can slap on some good bread, and it's a pretty tasty sandwich, even though it's not healthy at all. But anyway, you could turn out a big pile of those sandwiches for about nothing and feed a big crowd of people. And, the setting up with the dead, it still goes on here. And so that's kind of why the funeral sandwiches, they're just poor people's food that you can make a lot of for just a little bit of money, and feed a whole bunch of folks who are drinking coffee and staying up all night telling tales on the deceased, and jokes and whatever. But yeah, that's a big mountain tradition, is that setting up with the dead.
She included at the end that it pairs well with cherry Kool-Aid.
Uh-huh.
That's what.
Yeah,
she
that's
said.
also cheap. See?
Yeah, it says the grocery store sommelier picking out the right Kool-Aid packet for you. I just to give a little overview of so I mean, in case it wasn't clear, this cookbook is still coming together. So I am so excited though for the cookbook because, I mean, as was discussed by some folks, it's also a way for us to, I'm on a few boards of directors, and boards of directors and committees, oftentimes it'll be like, why am I on this board? Because what I'm really good at never comes into play. This cookbook allows us to activate some of our network members and what they're really good at, right? We have some great chefs, we have some great farmers, we have some great urban agriculturists in our across all of our networks, and especially here in Wisconsin. So, I feel bad asking them to come to Zoom meetings, but I love asking them to cook. So here's just I want to share this real quick, just some pictures. I like photos. This is just from a couple weeks ago. This is
Maria.
we were out, they came, so some of the folks on this call came out to Sauk County for Fermentation Fest, and the detour run by Worm Farm Institute. And here is us. I just found this picture because this is us eating tacos and tamales in rural Sauk County, made by some of the immigrant community that was there who were part of that. So absolutely the way in which food can be a way that brings us literally to a table. I just wanted to share some of the folks that we're going to have contribute from the Milwaukee and Sauk County side and Rural Urban Flow. On the left here is a remarkable woman named Elena Terry. Her organization's named Wild Berries. This is her a week ago standing in front of a brand new mural for voting rights in downtown Milwaukee. But here's her doing her job. She's really into food sovereignty and indigenous food. She's a remarkable human being, and she's based out of Sauk County. And here's her working in a different space. And she's just one of the folks in our network that we've been trying to find a good, like, she's always like, her work is really busy and it's around food and it's around cooking, and she's doing all this amazing stuff. So I feel great that I can say, hey, Elena, I want to pay you for one of your recipes. And all of a sudden, one of our network members who has this deep, incredible, beautiful set of legacies that she's a part of and lineages can represent flow in this cookbook. And she's actually started into a really rich dialogue with a woman I was just talking about, Venus Williams, who's here on the right in the green hoodie. This is at Alice's Garden, a remarkable urban farm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You can see actually a bunch of the folks on this call with Venus. This is just from a couple weeks ago too. Venus is, this is a 2-acre farm, that a community garden where there's 100 different garden plots, but Venus in her own right cooks the most delicious, soul-hugging food you can imagine, like her pot pies. I dream about them. But so Venus is another person who not only is a remarkable community organizer, but food and recipes and her own personal food ways are part of what she does and how she brings people together. And even I just said that term food ways, it's something we've discussed here, is that like a lot of times our food can be like a place of commonality, but then the ways that we put the recipes together can be where we learn, right? Like, so there's a lot of commonality and differences, which can be grounds for really exchanging with each other. And I just wanted to share this image because every time I walk into the Alice's Garden and I request any of Venus's time, I know her hands are busy. And this is the bowl that she put down is it calendula? Is that how you say it? This is what she put down. She was harvesting to say hello to us as we were coming through her farm. So I guess my point there is that we have great people in Milwaukee and Wisconsin. And as John said before, they might not be exactly who you think. So a couple of the other Wisconsin contributions are going to come from one of our core partners, CK, who I mentioned, who's actually been doing a project tracing the lineage of corned beef via Puerto Rico, where he is from and is right now, and its connection to slave trade, which is really interesting. So we're going to have a corned beef recipe. Yeah, so Gwen hasn't even heard that yet. So she was like, huh? Then also one of our other great chefs, one of our other great chefs in our network, AJ, he lives out in Sauk County. He's a Black man who hunts and is oftentimes the only Black man in his spaces, but he's this incredible chef, and he's going to contribute something that's of himself. So, I'm excited about how, like, maybe it's not going to be the Betty Crocker recipes you expect from Wisconsin. It's going to be us saying, here's who we are as Rural Urban Flow, getting to say, here's part of Wisconsin. We're not going to say it's like the Wisconsin recipes. So that's kind of what we're cooking up, pun intended, in Wisconsin.
Sounds absolutely wonderful. Can't wait to taste something. So yeah, I want to just go right into how are we going to use our cookbook once it's published? Any events or fundraisers, or how do we see ourselves using this great tool of wonderful recipes for food and organizing and conversations about race?
Well, we did talk about a primary use, it being a fundraising piece for us. And the other thing that we talked about was just the willingness to share our knowledge that we have collectively learned and individually learned with others who are doing similar work. Um, so that's kind of the meat of where we've gotten so far with how we intend to share the cookbook, but definitely use it as a fundraiser.
Denise, when I was being interviewed for this great job, and Adam put me on the spot and asked me how I could put together the recipe and how what would I contribute more or less to the cookbook. And I said, well, I would think that we should have a recipe for an appetizer kind of like a kebab, maybe like an olive, cheese, meat combination, but then also pair it with an icebreaker activity like the game that I made up. This is part of my interview process as well, to make up a game and also to run it with this game I call Random Thoughts. And I made it up, and what it is just gets everybody in the room talking. We just say randomly what's on our minds in a few moments. And if you don't say it in a number of moments that's allotted, seconds that's allotted, you're out. But it was a nice game because you can get back in every round. But that's an example of how I would see that. And also for our fundraiser, Denise, I thought it would be lovely to be able to have some of those dishes prepared and kind of do an admission to come and be a part and maybe perhaps discuss with some of us and have that fundraiser, but also offering the food and also using those tools that we also include in our cookbook. Those are my thoughts. Anybody else have some?
So I think, go ahead, John.
Oh, go.
I'll keep this quick. I keep taking up too much time. One of the opportunities I think the cookbook can present is for us in Wisconsin, this is going to allow for some of our we have a steering committee as Performing Our Future, but then we also have all these other people that are involved. This is an opportunity for some of the folks who are core to our work in each of our different places to help define the mainstream of what Performing Our Future is, what our organization is. So after the cookbook exists, I'm really excited about the opportunity to sit at the table that other people set and that other people are filling with food. And by that, might mean literally. I know it's hard to conceive of this in pandemic times, but like a community meal where none of the five of us were talking at all, right? Like and there's other folks from Performing Our Future who are core members, but to have some of the folks from our own communities start sparking with each other and start seeing each other and kind of feel the family environment that we know within Performing Our Future. I'm really excited about that. And then just one other quick thing is just a call and response. I mean, the rest of this idea that we have it's very easy to see how other people might contribute to something much like it. I think, after we do this work to obviously represent some of the food recipes from our places, but also the organizing, the cultural, the power building recipes. I'm very interested to see where folks, who are at this panel, folks in other spaces might start adding to that cookbook. And our designer said, he said, I don't want to make a coffee table book. I want to make a book for the kitchen. And that's exactly what we're talking about. And then if you're thinking about the kitchen, you're not thinking about how do I make a beautiful object that I can't dent or write in or, get messy, like how folks get messy with us after it exists. I'm really excited for. Went on too long again, John, your turn.
No, I just wanted to say that this is definitely a tool. To put emphasis back on that tool. We envision this being an opportunity for someone to really read the stories that we include, to look at the artwork and reflect on the initiatives that we share and the outcomes that we express. So it's definitely a tool for organizing, because that's what we are, that's what we do, and that's what we want to try and support others in their efforts to do. So it's cookbook,
Good, John.
but it's more than just that cookbook. So yeah, we want it to be a tool.
Absolutely. Well, has anybody else got anything that they want to add? If not, we'll go into our QA session.
I was just going to say that during this pandemic, more people than ever seem to be cooking at home. You got a lot of time on your hands. You're trying to quarantine or social distance, whatever. And I think it's a real timely thing. And as well, um, I think reaching out for people for recipes at this present time is a comforting thing too, because you know, a lot of people don't have a lot of connection outside their household or their workplace right now. And I just think we couldn't have come up with this at a better time. So it's kind of to me like good fortune has smiled on us that we were in that space in Baltimore the week that they were saying, don't shake hands, you know, don't, all these things they were telling us at that time. And we were kind of ignoring it and thinking it maybe it lasts for a month, whatever. And here we are all these months later, and it's still going strong and raging. In our part of the world, it took it a long time to get here, but now it's in these mountain communities and it's running wild. Our county here has been in the red um, on the map of Kentucky for several weeks now. And
Wow.
so cases are, you know, out the roof and new cases every day. And people are dying here. And it took it a long time to get here. I almost thought that it might be windborne and it couldn't get in these mountains. But boy, since it did, it's running wild down in here.
Tiffany?
Yes, yes, I'm here. I was reading a question possibly in the chat. So yes, let's go ahead and see. We had several people to say a few comments to us. Miss Yvonne Rodriguez says, my name is Yvonne Rodriguez. I work with first generation college bound families with USC Neighborhood Academic Initiative. I absolutely love your idea of a cookbook. Our group has an annual community service event, and a cookbook sounds like a wonderful contribution with a lasting impact. Thank you for all that you're sharing. Okay. And I was curious, what avenues folks outside your network will have to get involved? I think she says which mostly you're answering now. So how can people who are outside of our network, how can they have access or add to our cookbook? That's a great question.
Denise, you're muted.
Well, I think that they could contribute. It is a fundraiser tool as well for folks. So that could be something. And we have the opportunity to do multiple volumes. And there's a lot of organizing that needs to happen. There's a lot of community building that needs to develop. There's a lot of actions that need to be brought to bear with groups, organizations, people. So working with us or using our model is a way to be involved. even if it's not necessarily directly with us. But yes, it is a fundraiser. So we'll be selling the cookbook. So at some way phase down the road, or donating it out to different organizations. And then that piece will be how we connect, one way that we connect.
Anyone else care to share?
And I think part of the answer is we're not sure yet. I think that as the cookbook begins to take more and more concrete form, that we have discussed how it could kind of also have a digital life, right? Where the cookbook that we produce is going to be a beautiful printed object that you can hold in your hands, but that like I said before, it could be a call, and a response could be caught in a digital space so that it isn't a terminal project, or there might be subsequent editions of it.
I can also add that, to John's point, for a fundraiser, it would be nice if people, different organizations wanted to add on to our cookbook or submit something and offer a gift of in the form of money as a form of fundraising for us. I think that would be an awesome idea. Anyone else? I don't have any other questions. Miss Trina has said in the chat, she is looking forward to purchasing the cookbook. Thank you so much, Miss Trina. Anything else anybody else would like to add?
I actually did have a question, a couple of questions for you all that had come in separately. I guess first, for folks that were interested in developing something similar in their own communities, any suggestions you would have for them based on your experiences to date in building the cookbook to get started? And then as well, as folks know, as part of IA's Collective Creative Engagement, we have a call to action each week. And this week's call to action, which is so well aligned with the work that you are doing, asks us to identify the skills we are responsible for building in our communities to create liberatory spaces. And so I feel like you might all have really wonderful answers to that based on the work already that you are doing through Performing Our Future and building the cookbook of if you had to pick like one recipe that you would want to lift up as part of your cookbook, that would be building skills in your community to create equitable, liberatory, just futures. What would that recipe be? What would those skills be?
Put us on the spot, Nina.
Only because
Okay.
I know you have a
No,
lot to
that's-
say and you could answer that.
I have a thought on one, and this came up in the entire extent of what we were doing. So we hosted the meeting this year in Baltimore, and the first night in, we had a happy hour, welcoming everyone to the city and into the space. And one of our caterers provided a meal out, and it was fried chicken and fried fish. So everyone loves fried chicken for the most part. And even if you don't eat meat, then they have these new products that are not actually meat, they're vegan and all kinds of things. So they have fried chicken knockoffs, I could say. So that was something that really welcomed the delegations into our space. So that really struck me as like, hey, this is the kind of food we eat. This is what we have back home. And that came from the Letcher County delegation. Similarly, Black Belt Citizens, they had a similar comment of this is how we eat. And might not have heard it, but I'm certain that there's reflections of a fried chicken recipe in Milwaukee and Sauk counties. So I think that would be a good one there. And there's different components that go into that and how you organize people together for fried chicken. Sometimes you might bake your fried chicken. Sometimes you might actually fry it. You might do different ways. Maybe you do it outdoors, maybe you do it in. So you have to look at those components when you pull them together as an organizer and see what works for this community. Because it's not going to always be exactly the same, but the end result is always fried chicken. And that's something that we can always leverage on, whether it's a batter or a marinade or whatever it is. The result is that delicious, juicy, crispy fried chicken. And that's something that I think a lot of communities can relate to.
And I would add, I was listening to you, John, and Mina, what I would add to what John said is the built-in space, walking through someone's built-in space to find out what it looks like and what it feels like, and folks will be able to maybe relate the space that they're in to their own space and some similarities. And Gwen brought it up in terms of how they care for the porches and how we care for the steps. And so if she didn't walk through the space of West Baltimore, she would not have known that. So I think walking through the space to see what that structure is, to see what it feels like, and see how people are interacting. An example, most folks, when they see Penn and North, most folks outside of that part of Baltimore, they see people just hanging out on the street corner, and they wonder why people are hanging out on the street corner. And if you talk about the history of the Historic Arts Social Club, it was developed because when they came from the South, they hung out on the street corners and they were harassed by the police. They decided to come together and create their own space so that they would not be harassed by the police. So depending on your environment is how people interact with their environment. And so I would add that to that recipe that John is talking about.
I want to offer just real quickly the rural urban flow recipe. I think is going to be one that's I'm really excited about its place in the cookbook, because it's, as we've been building our methodology of creating a network across rural and urban spaces, I know it's something that the other delegations have been interested in Performing Our Future. But I know people around the country, we can pretend like we're not connected as rural and urban spaces, but we'll continue to exhaust our land and exhaust our resources and destroy the viability of living on this planet. So point is, I think the rural urban flow recipe, I think one is one I'm excited for, of how to see connectivity and create collaboration that one of our core collaborators, Donna Neuwirth, that also acknowledges like the importance of pleasure, right? The importance of, and that's why I like this cookbook, that like we don't come together as rural and urban people because, I mean, we know we all have hard work to do, but what we love being with each other, and we love each other's, the differences are a place to find, to fill up our fuel tank. So.
Gwen, especially because you have a catering business and company recipe to add.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you?
What was?
Oh, so I've just put you all on the spot because of our call to action to this week, and I know we're getting ready to wrap up. But for what recipe you might offer as in response to this week's call on the skills that we would like to build in our community to create those liberatory just spaces. And so folks around the country are thinking about what skills they would want to build and what your recipe would be.
I think that it's pretty elementary, but even less than elementary. I think it's preschool stuff. I think if we, now you're going to make me cry because you know I'm a crier.
Okay.
I always cry. If we could treat each other like the kids in the preschool treat each other. I mean, I know they fight and spat over toys, but for the most part, they just see each other as friends. And so I think that is the recipe. But I think without connecting around a project or a table, if you will, or to break bread together, without talking to each other, then we turn into the other. Without interacting with each other, then you're just the other to me. And I think that in the preschool, they are just friends. And so if we could get there, I don't know how to write that recipe out, but I do believe that's the recipe.
Mm,
And I'm sorry
Wow.
for crying.
No,
Thank you, Gwen.
thank you for sharing. That actually is a beautiful way to close this session, and thinking about bringing us back to our foundations and our roots of how we interact with each other as that recipe. I think it's pretty clear with the recipes that you've shared today and with Performing Our Futures work that you're figuring out the multiple versions of what that recipe is for us to not be othering each other and to break bread together. So a huge thank you to all of you, to Gwen, to Denise, to Adam, to John, to Tiffany for being here today, for Performing Our Futures work and keeping that like torch lit during all of these times. And, you know, more details to come on the recipe book. Hopefully we get to see you in New Orleans next year with a copy of the book, future details. So we'll share it out with the IA community. Also, thank you to all of our attendees today for joining today's session. Before I get into just a couple next steps, we have some special outro music for people. So do you guys want to say anything about the music that you picked for our outro?
Gwen?
Well, I did not suggest this, but John Harris has a great love for bluegrass music, and I do too, but I wouldn't have suggested it. But anyway, I was delighted that it was going to be played. So this is just a tune that everybody will set up and take notice if you play it in these mountains. So it's a Foggy Mountain Breakdown.
Awesome. So we'll be exiting with Foggy Mountain Breakdown. And for everybody else, we invite you to visit iagathering.org for upcoming programming, which most immediately tonight is Imagining America's Randy Martin Spirit Award presentation at 4 p.m. with our awardee, Arlene Goldbard, in conversation with Jeff Chang and Karen Atlas, discussing a new WPA. So good afternoon. We'll take you out with Foggy Mountain Breakdown, and we hope to see you tonight. Bye.
That music sounds like impossible. It's so fast.
It's
Isn't that
fast.
fast?
Yeah,
Hey,
you
you
ought
all-
to try dancing to that.
Yes, fast.
So when you all come to Kentucky, we're going to dance to that.
Oh man, we need to be in Kentucky. I cannot
You
wait to
do.
come to Kentucky. I haven't been there yet.
Hopefully it'll happen, March of 2021? We'll see, Tiffany.
Hope so.
Let's see. Everybody's been excited to have that be the place where the next national meeting is. So we can make it happen. We definitely can. I definitely fell in love with that place. I'm sure you guys would too.
Hopefully COVID will just float away.
We fell in love with you too, Tiffany.
Thank
Um,
you, Gwen.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll be sending out the recording for you later. So you can, hold on to it. And we've already been speaking, I know with Denise earlier about possibly putting together some sort of a TLC or virtual webinar once you actually have like the physical cookbook for us to support your fundraising efforts. And then hopefully, assuming we can all be in person at some point next year, to have you all in NOLA for to actually share the actual physical cookbook. So we've been getting a lot of messages separately about like, what's the next details? I'm like, when they have it, we'll be sharing it out with y'all. So thank you all again, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. This was fun.
Mina.
It's good to see you always. All right. Nice to meet you again, Mina.
Same.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you,
Bye.
Mina.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. It's wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.